It's the most wonderful time of the year. Steve Warner. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of AM Minnesota. We have the outgoing CEO and the incoming CEO of Allina District 1 Hospital in studio today. We're going to talk about health care, which is a topic that is on the national, the state, the local scene. Before I get to that, though, Dusty Dienst, Faribould's fire chief, will be with us tomorrow. We're going to talk about fire safety during the holidays. So I hope you can tune in tomorrow for AM Minnesota. I guess I'm going to let Stephen Pribyl, the outgoing CEO, introduce the incoming CEO of our local hospital.
Sure thing, Gordy. It's good to be here. I want to introduce to everyone Mr. David Albrecht, who is going to assume the position of president of District 1 Hospital on Monday, December 11th. And Dave comes to us with a ton of experience, 35 years in healthcare, and most recently has spent 12 years in Owatonna, 9 as the president. And what's somewhat unique, but not so much anymore, is he is going to continue that role, so he will have dual responsibility over Owatonna Hospital and District 1 Hospital come Monday. So we welcome Dave to the community, and we know he will do great things.
You have a lot on your plate, David.
We're sorting that out, and meeting schedules are one of the big challenges. We've been transitioning over the past 3-4 weeks, and I think things are starting to fall into place, and I expect to hit the ground running on Monday. So splitting time 50% at each facility, full day here on Tuesday, full day in Owatonna on Thursday, and then split half and half all the other 3 days just so I can maintain good visibility.
And we had a nice little chat after the tree lighting earlier this week.
We did.
You said this is kind of the trend these days in rural hospitals. They have to share administrators and share doctors, you were telling me.
Well, I think that was one of the attributes or the success factors we were looking at, physicians especially. And you know, we haven't talked about this with our physician community all that much yet, but I think there's one of the success factors for small hospitals is to be able to attract and retain high quality physicians, both primary care and specialty physicians. One of the first questions they ask when you're trying to recruit a new physician is, what's my call schedule? That's the specialty physician, because they can go to the larger markets and maybe only have to be on call overnight and weekends once every 6 weeks, whereas in these smaller medical staffs, if we just look at our own community, it's 1 and 2, 1 and 3, which the new physician's lifestyle is very important. So I think as we can cross over both markets, perhaps we can expand those call schedules in certain specialties and achieve that.
So what changes? I'm sure you've seen a lot of change. Well, so has David, but Stephen, how many years have you been in the healthcare industry?
37 years, Gordy. 37 years.
And when you think about when you started versus today?
Well, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is not what's changed, but what has been constant, and that is the caring for the patient, the focus on the patient. And of course, you know, the science of medicine, there's discovery and new things in that regard. But that human relations part, that touching, caring part is still there and still very important. The biggest change, however, has got to be, of course, technology, both medical technology and information systems, and the introduction, of course, of electronic medical records, which, even as onerous as it sometimes is to implement something like that, at the end of the day, it provides for more safe care, more sharing of appropriate information between the providers and the staff and so on. So yeah, the technology, though, is by far the biggest change I witnessed. You know, just even on, I can remember we did not have fax machines when I started. We did not have email. I'm that old, yes. And now everything is instantaneous communication and sharing of data and so on.
Well, that's not really all that long. I've been here, it'll be 31 years in June. So, you know, obviously when I started here, they didn't have some of that stuff either. We're going to take a little break, come back and talk more. I want to get into what they see as the future of healthcare, because both the incoming and outgoing CEO obviously are very close to the topic of healthcare. And there's been some items in the news, like Albert Lee talking about trying to... It's the most wonderful time of the year. Steve Warner. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of AM Minnesota. We have the outgoing CEO and the incoming CEO of Allina District 1 Hospital in studio today. We're going to talk about health care, which is a topic that is on the national, the state, the local scene. Before I get to that, though, Dusty Dienst, Faribauld's fire chief, will be with us tomorrow. We're going to talk about fire safety during the holidays. So I hope you can tune in tomorrow for AM Minnesota. I guess I'm going to let Stephen Pribyl, the outgoing CEO, introduce the incoming CEO of our local hospital.
Sure thing, Gordy. It's good to be here. I want to introduce to everyone Mr. David Albrecht, who is going to assume the position of president of District 1 Hospital on Monday, December 11th. And Dave comes to us with a ton of experience, 35 years in healthcare, and most recently has spent 12 years in Owatonna, 9 as the president. And what's somewhat unique, but not so much anymore, is he is going to continue that role, so he will have dual responsibility over Owatonna Hospital and District 1 Hospital come Monday. So we welcome Dave to the community, and we know he will do great things.
You have a lot on your plate, David.
We're sorting that out, and meeting schedules are one of the big challenges. We've been transitioning over the past 3-4 weeks, and I think things are starting to fall into place, and I expect to hit the ground running on Monday. So splitting time 50% at each facility, full day here on Tuesday, full day in Owatonna on Thursday, and then split half and half all the other 3 days, just so I can maintain good visibility.
And we had a nice little chat after the tree lighting earlier this week.
We did.
You said this is kind of the trend these days in rural hospitals. They have to share administrators and share doctors, you were telling me.
Well, I think that was one of the attributes or the success factors we were looking at, physicians especially. And we haven't talked about this with our physician community all that much yet, but I think there's one of the success factors for small hospitals is to be able to attract and retain high quality physicians, both primary care and specialty physicians. One of the first questions they ask when you're trying to recruit a new physician is, what's my call schedule? That's the specialty physician, because they can go to the larger markets and maybe only have to be on call overnight and weekends once every 6 weeks, whereas in these smaller medical staffs, if we just look at our own community, it's 1 and 2, 1 and 3, which the new physician's lifestyle is very important. So I think as we can cross over both markets, perhaps we can expand those call schedules in certain specialties and achieve that.
So what changes? I'm sure you've seen a lot of change. Well, so has David, but Stephen, how many years have you been in the healthcare industry?
37 years, Gordy. 37 years.
And when you think about when you started versus today.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is not what's changed, but what has been constant, and that is the caring for the patient, the focus on the patient. And of course, the science of medicine, there's discovery and new things in that regard. But that human relations part, that touching, caring part is still there and still very important. The biggest change, however, has got to be, of course, technology, both medical technology and information systems, and the introduction, of course, of electronic medical records, which, even as onerous as it sometimes is to implement something like that, at the end of the day, it provides for more safe care, more sharing of appropriate information between the providers and the staff and so on. So yeah, the technology though is by far the biggest change I witnessed. Just even I can remember we did not have fax machines when I started. We did not have email. I'm that old, yes. And now everything is instantaneous communication and sharing of data and so on.
Well, that's not really all that long. I've been here, it'll be 31 years in June, so obviously when I started here they didn't have some of that stuff either. We're going to take a little break, come back and talk more. I want to get into what they see as the future of healthcare, because both the incoming and outgoing CEO obviously are very close to the topic of healthcare. And there's been some items in the news, like Albert Lee talking about trying to start their own hospital and that sort of thing. So we'll discuss some of those topics when AM Minnesota continues. Your Pioneer sales representative in the Faribault area. They are also a full-service ag retailer, herbicides, fertilizer, custom application, all crop production products, special prices on brand name and generic herbicides. Ask about a free, you heard me right, free customer appreciation gift. Call 507-384-9191. It's 507-384-9191. Werner Farm Seed in Dundas for quality seed at reasonable prices. Give Paul or Jean a call. The number 507-645-7995. That's 507-645-7995. Werner Farm Seed in Dundas. We're chatting a bit off the air about where to go next. I'm guessing that insurance drives a lot of what happens in healthcare. Is that right, David?
Yeah, insurance has been the primary source of reimbursement other than Medicare, Medicaid, and yeah, we're seeing some significant transactions nationally. I think there was a announcement about an Aetna CVS merger, and then United Healthcare also bought a large medical group. So on the flip side, Allina is partnering with Aetna to create an insurance product, and others, Health Partners is a combined insurance healthcare delivery. A lot of market pressure moving forward here.
And we've seen, well, you've gone through the, District 1 was a community hospital, and now is part of the Allina family.
Well, yeah, you see integration in all areas, insurance and healthcare communities, and part of it is economies of scale and so on. But I would submit that one of the greatest advantages in doing it in healthcare situation is learn from best practice, share best practice. So, as you know, I've known Dave for a couple of years or several years, even before we became part of Allina, but we talk just once in a while, and now we're meet on a regular basis with all the hospital presidents within Allina and share best practice and working on initiatives together. And so there's great value. Some people get worried sometimes when a standalone something becomes part of a chain. And I would submit in healthcare that's a very good thing, because you bring the best practice and that economies of scale. I would also comment on what's changing in the market relative to insurance companies becoming providers or buying provider practices, or CVS is a provider and they're joining an insurance company. The point of all that is to reduce the utilization and potentially unnecessary utilization, or also have care delivered at the lowest cost location, and so that people aren't necessarily accessing the highest cost healthcare. And sometimes we worry about people coming into our emergency department when it's not really an emergency. And so with the insurance companies partnering with providers, there will be initiatives and programs put in place that educate the patient or the population and steer to some extent to the lower cost opportunities. So you'll see more people, in the case of the CVS Aetna merger, more people being steered towards a CVS in-store clinic rather than the other opportunities for healthcare.
Would you agree with that, David?
I think we're going to see changes we don't even understand today. Whether that works or something else, I know there's just healthcare applications being developed that will monitor patients through their wristwatch. Those are already there today. They're not developed fully, but right. We think about healthcare delivery, and I don't think we quite understand what is going to happen next with technology. Another big issue is how do you deliver quality care, continue in rural areas. Telemedicine is an emerging field. We in District 1 will be hopefully doing that next year for our overnight patients so that they're cared for remotely. That's happening in Owatonna today. We're piloting in Owatonna and New Ulm, 2 Allina facilities. Weekend telepsychiatry this weekend is the first time we'll do that. So I don't know that we quite understand what will emerge. I think the level of hospital care will change. Again, continue to go more toward outpatient. So it's keep your eyes wide open.
I consider us being very blessed here in Faribault, and I'm interested to get your take on this, in the fact that we have both Allina and Mayo on the same healthcare campus. Not a lot of communities have that, right?
No, not a lot of communities have that. I think the one thing also, there's not a lot of independent hospitals. There still are some. There's some around here. I think the one thing that really is the challenge is how to keep up with the technology, the regulatory, and the advances in medicine for independents. As District 1 aligned with Allina, it now has access to the same technology, the same resources that you would get at Abbott Northwestern. So I think it it is a blessing to be able to tap into those things, and I was in an independent system, leader in an independent system before I came here, and it is a lot of work just to keep up, and so here we've got a lot more resources to do that.
Yeah.
Gordy, to your point about having the fortunate or being fortunate to have both Mayo and Allina here, you're absolutely right. It's a wonderful healthcare community, and what fits perfectly or is going to be comfortable for Dave is in the Owatonna community. It's an Allina hospital and predominantly, in fact, almost 100% a Mayo Clinic practice. And so he's very familiar with the Mayo Clinic leadership and has relationships well established with them. So this is not going to be a radical change for him whatsoever.
So it's not an us versus them. You guys are collaborating in a lot of areas.
We have to partner. There's two clinics there, and Allina is going to compete with Mayo at the clinic level. But when it comes to hospital care, we do have to partner with the providers in the community, regardless of who they are.
So that'll work seamlessly.
We finesse it seamlessly. Yes.
It takes a lot of open communication. A lot of collaboration. For instance, Dave and I this morning were at our medical executive committee, which is the leadership of the campus medical staff. And it's got Allina physicians and Mayo physicians at the table discussing issues relative to healthcare. And it's a wonderfully open, transparent conversation, and everybody kind of checks their name tag at the door because it's about patient care, and that's the important thing.
The other thing I'd just add is I have great relationships with the Mayo leadership in this market. That's been built over the 12 years, and so we're very open and honest, transparent with each other, and that's really the foundation of where it works.
Well, I'm sure there are differences. I mean, obviously,
Yes.
Mayo might want to do things differently than Allina. That's where we're talking about cooperation here.
Right, and this is an Allina facility here, and it's going to follow Allina policy procedure. We have to be delivering care the same way here as we are in Owatonna, as we are in New Ulm, Cambridge, Buffalo, a host of other Allina facilities.
I think of the changes I've seen at that hospital since I arrived back in 1987. One of the first things that comes to mind is security.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you never used to have security people.
Mm-hmm.
You needed to walk in the hospital anytime, day or night. That's not the case now.
One of the things that keeps me up at night, I worry about that continually because every time, and there is violence. We have all our staff trained. We know these people are trained in de-escalation, and we're rehearsed in that. But there's been incidences not too far from here that have been tragic.
Right.
And we've been, since we became part of Allina, we've got a whole different level of professionalism when it comes to security. We've got Allina security on our campus 24 hours a day. And we also have changed our access points. And so with the opening of the new emergency department, which is state-of-the-art, high-tech, very spacious, we also set up a security office right at the front door that's all glass, and we've got monitors and so on. And so some of the community might have been up at the campus and come in the evening and hopefully walked in the front door. Well, the front door now, the east side door, the State Avenue door, is now locked at night, with the idea that all patients that need to come into the building, whether it's emergency department or visit a family member, will come in through the emergency department side, so it's controlled access. And to Dave's point about the increase in violence, it just is a phenomenon it's multifactorial, whether it's an increase in behavioral health patients or chemical dependency patients that are coming in, and one of the features of the design of our emergency department includes several what we call safe rooms, where a patient is going to be roomed and not at risk to hurt themselves or others. So.
Yeah, I went on that tour
Mm-hmm.
in early August. Boy, what a gorgeous emergency department we have here at District 1.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'm most proud of in that regard is, yes, we brought in an architect that focuses on medical buildings, but what the architect did is facilitated conversation on the design with our staff. Our staff's fingerprints are all over the final design of what they believe to be the right way to do it. And that included taking tours of other hospitals, Owatonna, Northfield, Cambridge, West Health, and picking up ideas on the best way to design an emergency department. I think we ended up with quite a product.
We guys are very familiar with what's happening in Albert Lee. The Mayo had announced they're going to move some of their services to Austin. That did not set well with some people in Albert Lee. They started up a group that is looking into possibly having their own community hospital. There was a report done. They say it's feasible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I do have a message for our community here. Yeah, most of the acute inpatient services, including obstetrics, are being moved to Austin, and the mental health component is being moved to Albert Lee, still maintaining an emergency department and all the surgical capabilities and some of the other services. Inpatient is a minority of what we do at District 1 Hospital, and it is at most community hospitals, Austin, Albert Lee, no exception. The one thing is they have a Save Our Hospital initiative to try to come up with a different option. And I don't want to say anything negative about their efforts, because I think it's it's community pride,
right.
But it's late. Save Our Hospital in Faribault is today, and that's where you choose to have your services. I can look at the scorecards we look at, and for the services that are delivered at District 1, they're as high quality as you'll find anywhere. Now, we don't do all procedures, and we're quick to refer where we're not capable. But you got to support your community hospitals. So if there's a vote to be taken, it's the vote to choose a local option, which includes a physician that's going to support the hospital, and that's very key. So if you go to the Allina Clinic and the Mayo Clinic, those physicians will support the hospital, and the infrastructure of the hospital to maintain it long term just requires that. So every time we are making a choice of where to get our health care, that's a vote to save our hospital.
And if those physicians think that you need, some other care, they'll refer you to the Mayo Clinic.
And that's the gatekeeper of this. It's a physician decision of where that care is to be delivered. They know their capabilities, and we take that very seriously. So if there's a condition that presents that they don't believe we're capable of or we don't offer, yes, they're going to take you to the best setting that they know in the most efficient way that they can think possible.
And our guests this morning are Stephen Pribyl, the outgoing CEO, who is going to go somewhere warm, I'm sure, very soon, and the incoming CEO, David Albrecht of Allina District 1 Hospital, here on our AM Minnesota program today. So what is your plan for retirement?
Well, my wife jokes the first thing I'm going to do is catch up on sleep. And no, we're looking forward to the holidays. We've got 5 grandchildren, and you can fill your week with holiday programs and get-togethers and so on. So it'll be just that much more flexible and open schedule to be able to enjoy the holidays. And then maybe February time frame, know some people down in the Arizona area, and we'll go and camp out with them for a while. And then we'll kind of take it one day, 1 month at a time, and see where things land for us.
You a little jealous, or you still like working?
I was writing our email to our employees, which I do every Friday in Owatonna today, and I've said this to others. The one strange thing that's happened to me that I didn't expect now that we've done this transition, I actually am reinvigorated. There are challenges here, and I don't have all that many years left in my career either, but this has been reinvigorating for me. The engine is on full speed, and so I didn't expect that.
So who do you root for when Faribault plays Owatonna?
I knew Owatonna had a good team, and they had a state possibility. I didn't grow up in Owatonna, so it's not there. I think healthcare, we have to overcome divides because again, economies of scale, just trying to reinvent the wheel for healthcare in every community. I'm hopeful we're going to be able to do something in mental health across Steele and Rice County. We're applying for a state, I hope we're applying for a state innovation grant. Our Honoring Choices End of Life has crossed both markets. We got to do more things together in healthcare. There's just not enough resources to independently try to do everything ourselves.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we talked about before going on the air, Steve, and you had mentioned that you had a chart of all the hospitals in southern Minnesota, and when we talk about the Albert Lee issue or wherever, there are plenty of hospitals in southern Minnesota, you're saying.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I mean, people understand and know the history of healthcare in Minnesota, particularly southern Minnesota. And I mean, I grew up in Owatonna, and when the local physician couldn't completely take care of you, it was normal and natural to end up in Rochester, of course, and we all enjoyed that. The thing that goes back to Dave's point about save the hospital, because we have so many choices in southern Minnesota, if people are choosing to go elsewhere for care that can be provided locally, they're taking business out of town, and that can have a financial impact on the local hospital, the local healthcare campus. And so even though there are that many choices, people need to be thinking about, all right, what do I want in my community? What's the key essential infrastructure components of a healthy, thriving community, and hospitals is one of them. To recruit people to the community, not just to the healthcare campus, people are going to ask about what's the healthcare capability. Yes, there are choices, and some of our communities, and it's not exclusive to southern Minnesota, want to hold on to that hospital. And what you and I were talking about, Gordy, is a town that I'm familiar with, a community of 3,000 people that was holding on to a hospital but couldn't economically support it. And so some tough decisions had to be made in that community, and that may be part of the decision making that Mayo made down on Interstate 90.
Yeah. Of course, we weren't in on those discussions, so it'll be interesting to see what finally becomes of that. You know, one of the other blessings, my opinion, was the cancer center here in
Piper
Faribault,
Cancer Institute,
so that people who are undergoing chemotherapy don't have to make that trip to Rochester or the cities. They can do it right here.
Same
in town.
care you get if you traveled, and care local, convenience. It's there when you need it. Emergency services, when you need them, you don't think about them until you do, but you want it to be great.
Yeah. Owatonna has a cancer center too?
We do not. Actually, it's because of the Mayo relationship in Owatonna. It's a little different market. We don't have any Allina physicians in Owatonna. The clinic actually does some of the cancer care, but we don't have the Virginia Piper in Owatonna.
Oh, okay. So that's something to feather in our cap.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we opened up our new facility back in the spring of 2011, which drew attention to it, but the reality is we had oncology services and chemotherapy services predating the new center, but now it is Virginia Piper Cancer Institute with standardized protocols, standardized clinical standards, yes. And our medical oncologist, for instance, Dr. Vakalanka, is part of a larger group of Allina medical oncologists, and again, sharing best practice and bringing that to Faribault. So it is a particularly, I think, significant feature of a smaller community hospital to have that access to that care.
And again, it's one of the advantages of being part of a larger system.
Senator John Marty would still like to see a single-payer health care system here in Minnesota. I would be curious to get your take on that.
I wonder how much time do we have left on this show, because that is a
topic for another day.
Well,
right?
And I can just say I think the favored option is Minnesota Care. If you understand the underlying principles and where Minnesota came from, you'd say, how could that ever work? Because that program was created based upon a tax on the very people who deliver the care, the physicians, the hospitals, and the insurance companies. So that's what funded that. That's what keeps those premiums low. Plus, the reimbursement is based upon Medicaid rates for low-income folks. And if that's the payment system for everyone, every hospital in the state would go bankrupt because they're inadequate. We lose money on Medicaid. So to think that they can just plug and play Minnesota Care does not work. It's just an economic train wreck.
I take it you're in agreement with that. You're nodding your head in approval.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Dave alluded to this earlier about it's difficult to see what the horizon looks like because of the complexity of the whole system, and that includes the payers, the providers, and the patient, and the politics also. We just don't know where the politics are going to land on this. And you mentioned it, Gordy, at the federal state and even at the local level, things can have a nuance to them. And so I wouldn't want to put a bet on a final destination. I think that would be high risk. And in fact, I think insurance companies and providers are all trying to be as nimble as possible and be ready to flex depending on what the federal government does in particular as things pan out.
Yeah, I think I gave you a very simplistic answer. It is very complex. I think I would just say there's too many fingers in the healthcare pie in total. So single payer would help do that, but we've got to find another solution for payment for those services. So.
Well, and as Stephen said earlier, bottom line here is the patient, right?
Absolutely, and I guess that's where I get pride and joy in what I do, because we come back to that. Bottom line has to be there to fund the resources to provide what's best for the patient, but at the end of the day, it's all about what we do and the outcomes that we achieve for the health status of everyone that walks through our door.
Yeah, you're in the business because you want to care for people.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, I'll add something to that. And Dr. Penny Wheeler was visiting us a year and a half ago, and she said, "Isn't it interesting, based on the economic model, that healthcare providers financially celebrate disease and injury?" And she was making the point that we need to turn this around and focus on health and wellness and safety. But our current reimbursement system does currently reimburse us for volume, and a little bit for outcomes, and we've got to continue to work, and that's why Allina is working with Aetna to have their own insurance product that would in fact help the patient be aware of health and wellness opportunities, and then also pay the providers based more on outcomes than just simply the volume.
Yeah, and if we have a minute, how that happened goes way back to the early development of the Medicare program. It was basically to help fund those that were very sick, and it at the time was the right thing to do. But as time has gone on, that program has not changed. It still incents sick care, and it's sort of like the tax code. When they're trying to enhance the economy, they go to the tax code. Well, when you have the incentives built in the Medicare program the way it is, that's how we got into this. And a lot of the regulatory things and the things that we deal with are remnants of what the federal government did with the Medicare program.
Well, we've about run out of time. Stephen, best of luck in your retirement.
Thank you.
I'm kind of jealous. And David, I hope we can do this on a regular basis.
We can find time to do it again.
To talk more about healthcare, because it is such an important topic. Like I said on a post promoting today's show, we are all affected by healthcare. Every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of us. That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota. Tomorrow again, Dusty Dienst, Faribault's fire chief. We talk about safety during the holidays. You're in tune to KDHL AM in Faribault, Minnesota. Have a great day.